welcome everyone to the Campus Pride Spotlight Series. My name is Ayla Azim, my pronouns are she and her, and I am a Campus Pride intern. For those who don't know, Campus Pride is a leading national nonprofit that advocates for LGBTQ+ equity on college campuses. You can learn more at campuspride.org. Today, I'll be interviewing Kenyon College for the Campus Pride Spotlight Series. This series is all about what today's colleges and universities offer today's LGBTQ+ students, our diverse gender and sexuality spectrum. We will highlight colleges and universities that are providing LGBTQ+ inclusivity on their campus and learn more about their programs and services. I want to introduce to you the representative from Kenyon College now.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, thank you so much for meeting with Campus Pride for the Spotlight Series. Welcome. Please introduce yourself. Please provide your name, your pronouns, and your role on campus.
Hi, my name is Timothy Bussey, and my pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Associate Director for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Kenyon College, which is located in scenic Gambier, Ohio, and so we are actually in central Ohio. And if you're familiar with Ohio geography, about an hour and a half-ish from Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you so much for your introduction. It's wonderful to have you here today. You have a 5 out of 5 star rating on the Campus Pride Index at campusprideindex.org. And you've been ranked among the best of the best in terms of LGBTQ+ friendly colleges and universities. So congratulations. To start out, tell us what are some things that are on your campus for an LGBTQ+ student? And specifically, what does your campus do for LGBTQ+ students that creates an inclusive space?
Yeah, so we're super excited about the 5 out of 5 ranking on the Campus Pride Index. And we're very much honored to hold that recognition along with, I think it's about 40 or so other colleges and universities across the country. And in terms of sort of spaces that we have on campus that are specifically focused on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also just sort of the LGBTQ+ community more broadly, our sort of hub is the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And we have our own dedicated space on campus. So we actually have our own building with a lounge, conference room, workstations, all of these things, and our obviously offices as well. And that office actually oversees essentially all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion related programming and sort of guides that work across campus. And we also oversee the various support initiatives that help make sure that our LGBTQ+ students, or students of color, have a supportive, inclusive, and then ultimately successful time at Kenyon College. We also have a few various what are called program houses. And so some colleges kind of call these like living and learning communities, but what they essentially are dedicated spaces where we have student residences on the top floor, but programming spaces on the bottom floor. And so the two that are probably most of interest for this sort of spotlight, certainly not the only ones that are on campus, but the two that are probably of the most interest would be the Crozier Center for Women and Unity House. And so the Crozier Center for Women is essentially our women's center on campus. They provide tons of resources related to gender identity and gender expression. And within that mission, they also do specifically work to make sure that they're trans inclusive, but they also do programming around non-binary issues as well. And then Unity House, which we just saw a couple photos of, is our LGBTQ+ programming house. And same thing as the Crozier Center for Women, this is a space that's open to anyone on campus. We have a resource library, safer sex supplies, a lounge that just is sort of a gathering space and a hub for students who want to come together and talk and hang out. And it's also a space that a lot of our student groups, our LGBTQ+ student groups, use for their meetings. And it's sort of essentially a hub for student gatherings and things like that.
Thank you so much for your answer.
And I did forget one thing, Ayla, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
In terms of how we support our students, this is a really, really important thing. I went through like the spaces and totally blanked on that one. In terms of how we support our students, and I think really what speaks to our ability to sort of reach the level of that 5 out of 5 on the Campus Pride Index, it's listening to our students. It's listening to what they need and letting that really guide the work that we do across campus. And some of the recent things that have happened because of listening to our students and really advocating for them have been things like the expansion of gender neutral bathrooms across campus. We have 50 right now, and we're getting to, I think it's the final count is going to be like close to 70, if I'm not mistaken. I need to go through and count, but there's a lot of them, which is really, really exciting. And we are also the first place in Knox County, Ohio, to offer PrEP. So the once-a-day pill that you can take to reduce your likelihood of a new HIV infection by more than 90%. And we actually offer that at our on-campus health center, which is, again, something that our students were really advocating for. And, we were listening and saying like, okay, this is something that we need to work to make sure that this resource is available for them. So that's really sort of the thing that guides the work that we do. So I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Thank you so much for your answer. So what example can you share that signifies the importance of having a space on campus for LGBTQ plus students to learn, live, and grow?
Yeah, so in terms of just sort of like the physical spaces, our Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, we actually just moved last academic year to a newly expanded space. So the college actually invested in providing us a newly expanded and dedicated space. And I kind of mentioned this already, but we have in that space where our office is located, which is Allen House on campus. We have a student lounge, conference rooms, workstations, and that also really serves as a hub for not just our LGBTQ plus students, but really students all across campus. But in terms of our work, it really does go across campus and even beyond it. And for students that are at Kenyons, at Kenyon College, they can really see themselves across all areas of campus. And we really intentionally work to collaborate with all aspects of campus life. And you can kind of see that in I think like two examples that I'll kind of give where you can kind of see that work happening in places that aren't directly just tied to our office. In spring, the Gun Gallery, which is the art museum on campus, this past spring, they hosted a really wonderful exhibition called Access Mundo, which is about essentially queer Chicano activism in LA from the 70s to the 90s. And along with that, we also hosted an exhibition of Kenyon College specific panels of the AIDS Memorial Quilt and hosted that on campus. For the AIDS Memorial Quilt, unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic stopped us from being able to open it in person, but we worked with the Gun Gallery to actually make sure that we had virtual tours that were happening. We worked with some of our community organizations to make sure that that was accessible over Facebook Live. And, kind of another example, because Kenyon is very much known for literary stuff. We have obviously this great literary journal on campus called the Kenyon Review. And they do a really, really wonderful podcast. And every October, for the past couple years, they've actually invited our office to work with them and collaborate on essentially a special episode of the podcast that talks about LGBTQ plus literature. And in the past couple years, I'm very thrilled to say that they've told us that that's actually some of their most listened to content, which is super, super exciting. So really, you can see yourself in so many places across campus, and it isn't just stuff that's happening in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. There's really this level of investment that's happening in the classroom, in residential life, and then obviously through our various partners, like I gave you the example with the Gun Gallery and Kenyon Review.
Yeah, that was a really good answer. What you said about LGBTQ plus literacy seemed really interesting. So regarding LGBTQ plus policy on your campus, can you tell us more about that and how do students feel about such policy?
Yeah, so probably for a lot of students that are watching this, like we're all very aware, especially if you're a trans or non-binary student, you're probably very aware of what Title IX is and why Title IX and trans inclusive Title IX policies are super important. But in terms of Kenyon's policies, just to kind of speak really, really clearly, Kenyon's policies have been inclusive of sexuality, gender identity, and gender expression for years. This is my third year at the college, and that policy has been LGBTQ plus inclusive for a lot longer than my tenure. And so that's something that is very much longstanding. at the college. It's not something that's new. It's not something that's, sort of a reaction. Like, that has been a long-standing policy to make sure that the non-discrimination policy of the college is inclusive of the LGBTQ plus community. Following the Trump administration's rescindance of trans-inclusive Title IX guidance back in 2017, the college actually issued a public statement saying that, essentially saying that, if you're leaving it up to individual educational institutions to decide whether or not they're going to interpret trans-inclusive protections under Title IX, then we are going to follow that. We are going to follow essentially the Obama era guidance that does interpret that and says that it has to be trans-inclusive. And I think the fact that the college continued to operate in that way, but also the fact that they made a public commitment saying that we are going to stand with our trans students and we're going to make sure that our policies are trans-inclusive, I think is really, really wonderful. And kind of one other thing that I know I didn't necessarily think about in undergrad, but is also super important, is thinking about the local community and the surrounding community and what protections exist there. And we actually, our students and folks in our office and across campus also communicated essentially the importance of a local non-discrimination ordinance that was LGBTQ plus inclusive. And we actually communicated that to the village council, so essentially the local government for the village of Gambier, Ohio. And they actually partnered. So, once we sort of had these conversations with them about why this was important for the local community to also have these protections, they actually partnered with Equality Ohio, which is the state's leading LGBTQ plus advocacy organization. And Gambier, it's kind of this like odd but like cool recognition, became the first place in the country to pass a non-discrimination ordinance over Zoom, because this process was like starting in January, but it's obviously a slower process to get like a new law on the books essentially. And so all the read-throughs and like the mandatory sessions they had to have continued during the start of the COVID-19 pandemic back in March, but continued online. And then I think this photo is from May, if I'm not mistaken, but that's Gwen from Equality Ohio. She's fantastic. And that is a screenshot of the Zoom call of everyone celebrating the passage of Gambier's LGBTQ plus inclusive non-discrimination ordinance. And I think that made us the 32nd place in Ohio to do that. But again, the first in the country to do it over Zoom, which is kind of odd, but also very, very exciting. And it's super exciting that it also passed unanimously. Like the village council members were celebrating that because they also recognize the importance of making sure that the local community had those protections in addition to the protections for the students at the college. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer. I'm Southern and I talk a lot.
No, it's fine. That was really good. That's really cool. So in your personal opinion, why does your campus feel the need to have inclusive resources and spaces for LGBTQ plus life?
Yeah, so I think just sort of the importance of it. I mean, it all boils down to like, it's about equity. Like, it's making sure that every student has not an equal opportunity to succeed, but an equitable opportunity, making sure that they have the support for equal outcomes, not that we're providing equal resources. We're making sure to distribute our resources and really making sure that we're targeting those resources in such a way that it's ensuring an equitable experience. And to me, like, that's such an important thing to remember. And that really is what guides our work in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, in the work that we do with LGBTQ plus students of color, and the various other student groups and campus partners that we collaborate with to make sure that our international students are supported, that our students with disabilities are also supported. And when I think about my own college experience, I went to a relatively small state school, had really, really wonderful faculty, but back when I was an undergrad, there wasn't really a lot of investment, and not just at my alma mater, but really I think a lot of colleges weren't at the place where they were really actively doing a lot for LGBTQ plus inclusion initiatives across campus. And I was able to succeed. I'm a first generation college student, and it blows my mind that I was able to finish school and go on to graduate school and all of these things. And, it really does still blow my mind to this day. But, it's really because I had faculty and staff that were there supporting me, that recognized that they needed to do what they could to help, first gen college students, LGBTQ plus students. And so, really that's one thing that actually drove me to wanting to do this work, was basically wanting to repay that kindness and that work that other people did to help me succeed. And ultimately, our work is really guided by listening to our students, but making sure that we're focused on student retention, student support, and then ultimately student success.
That's a really good answer. So how do LGBTQ plus students get involved on your campus? And do you have any active out LGBTQ plus student leaders?
Yeah, so there are tons of ways to get involved. The kind of most obvious one, we do have a few LGBTQ plus student groups on campus. Currently we have 10, so we have quite a few of them. So I won't run through the entire list, but if folks are interested, they are on our office's webpage. We have like a huge dedicated landing page to LGBTQ plus issues on campus. But we have 10 different LGBTQ plus student groups. The two newest are the ones that I'll kind of like hint at. The two newest are a group called ASAP, which is Ace Space and Arrow Place. So it's a group for asexual and aromantic students. And that student group actually ended up developing after our inaugural, back in 2019, our inaugural Kenyon Queer and Trans Studies Conference. A group of Kenyon students put together a panel on asexuality at this conference that we hosted, and talked to me afterwards. They're like, we kind of really want to make like a student group. And I was like, let's do it. Like, I can totally help y'all with that. And they know that I am openly a member of the ACE community. So they actually asked me to serve as their co-advisor, and we have a faculty member who is also a member of the community that has signed on as their other co-advisor. And so that group is going strong, and they've now been around for about a year and a half. And the other newest group is QTPOC, so Queer and Trans People of Color. And that group also really got going after the Kenyon Queer and Trans Studies Conference. And this is a group of students that were actually at the, we had a Queer and Trans POC breakout session at the conference for intra-community dialogue. And this is a group of some of the students that attended that particular session. But the student group really ended up developing after that conference too. And so we're really seeing like sort of the impact of the programs that we host, and like how they're actually making real change on campus. But in terms of like getting involved in other ways, I mean, Kenyon is a liberal arts college. Like, there are so many ways for students to get involved across the campus community. So in terms of like athletics, for instance, Kenyon actively works to make sure that the athletics environment is LGBTQ plus inclusive. Nearly every single one, with the exception of like 2 people, I think, that were like on vacation at the time when this happened, but nearly every person, every faculty, every staff member and coach in the Kenyon Athletic Center has gone through the NCAA LGBTQ One Team program, which is the NCAA's first LGBTQ plus inclusion program, and it's exclusively for Division III athletics. And I am actually one of, I think, about 70 people across the country. I hesitate there because I'm not right with the numbers on it, but one of like 70 or so people across the country that's trained to facilitate the program. We super proud of our athletics department. Like, they have multiple gender neutral locker rooms in our athletic center, which also is just so important. But I mean, there's so many other areas of campus life. So like thinking of like LGBTQ inclusion in drama, the arts. I gave you the example of the Kenyon Review. Our fraternity and sorority life actively does a lot of stuff with the LGBTQ plus community, but there are so many other ways to get involved on campus. And we also do actively participate in a variety of community programs. And this is a photo back in 2019 when we were able to do things in person, which we're excited to be able to do again. But this is me and a group of students at AIDS Walk, Ohio. And the college annually participates in that. And I think that year we raised about $2,500, which went to HIV/AIDS service organizations across the state.
That was a really good answer. So, how does your campus support students across sort of different intersections of identity? And yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of like supporting students across like different intersections, and like thinking of maybe other, are you kind of thinking of like maybe other identities that aren't often as sort of visibly supported in like campus programming? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we do is regularly with our programming work to showcase that the broader diversity of the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, we know that the LGBTQ plus community is like an extremely diverse community of different genders and sexualities, but we also know that there's a lot of diversity within that community when we think intersectionally. So when we think about race, when we think about nationality, when we think about disability and ability status. So, you know, really what we try to do is regularly make sure that we're acknowledging and celebrating the diversity of that community. And we've been really fortunate, I think, to be able to do that with some really wonderful leading national organizations and speakers. So back in 2019, we actually hosted a series of events that happened over a series of days with folks from the National Center for Transgender Equality. So like actually having like one of the leading national trans organizations like on campus talking about issues of trans inclusion and celebrating that part of the community. This past October for LGBTQ plus History Month, we really focused on sort of contemporary issues in the community. So particularly in the past 10 years or so, so more recent histories. But this past October, we were really excited to be able to host two organizers virtually, of course, from Interact, Advocates for Intersex Youth. And so really making sure that we're celebrating and acknowledging that broader diversity. We also hosted with ASAP an ACE Week panel, which was really exciting. But, you know, in terms of sort of our other heritage months, we also really make sure that LGBTQ plus programming extends throughout the year. Like we don't just do LGBTQ plus History Month. Like we also make sure that we have various crossover events to recognize those different intersections. And so in that LGBTQ plus History Month flyer, you might have noticed that we had a Loteria game night. So that was actually a crossover event with Latinx Heritage Month. And that's something that we really work to do throughout the year and throughout the various heritage months. So Women's History Month, Black History Month, and so forth and so on. But we also do work to make sure that we're providing support and resources, particularly around mental and physical wellness services off campus and beyond. We have, like many colleges do now, a trans at insert college name. Ours is trans at Kenyon landing page, which tells you all the things you might need to know about changing name, gender markers on various college documents and things like that. But we also do actively work to, you know, make sure we're providing support to that aspect of the community. We regularly partner with Trans Ohio. They're on campus in a traditional year. They're on campus at least once a semester, hosting a free gender marker and or name change clinic. And that's open to Kenyon students, faculty, and staff, but also open to anyone in the broader community. We've had sometimes folks drive over an hour to come to our campus because that was the closest one that happened to them. And so, you know, really making sure that we're also extending that support to the local community as well. And we also have a lot of support in terms of HIV prevention and HIV treatment resources. And we have a lot of that information, like I said, on our webpage too. But ultimately, you know, it really goes down to making sure that we're providing those resources, but that we're also providing ongoing training for faculty, staff, student leaders. And that happens, like I said, across so many aspects of campus. At new student orientation, all Kenyon students get information on LGBTQ plus identities. Like that happens every year now in orientation for every student, making sure that they have at least a basic common understanding of what this community is. But we're also, like I said, really active in various community outreach initiatives. So, I talked about kind of AIDS Walk Ohio a little bit ago and the Gambier non-discrimination ordinance, but we're really active in a lot of things that we're doing across the community as well. For instance, some of our student members from ASAP actually participated in a statewide ACE Week panel that was hosted by ACE and Arrow Alliance of Central Ohio. I have the mug right here, which is a sort of side project that I founded throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's the first ACE and Arrow organization in the state of Ohio. And that was, sponsored by a number of really big organizations here: GLSEN Central Ohio, Equitas Health, the Newark Ohio Pride Coalition, which is a smaller pride organization in Newark, Ohio, which is close to Gambier, and Kenyon. But making sure that we're actively participating in those community outreach initiatives and that we're also giving back. And so really that support and that work happens in so many other spaces too. And we're also actively working to make sure that we're sharing our resources with other community organizations and other colleges and universities within our area as well.
That was a really good answer. So social justice, equality, and equity are constant journeys of progress. And what's on the agenda for your campus within the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, so we've been really focusing on really making sure that we're intentionally working towards that 5 out of 5 on the Campus Pride Index. And we've now officially gotten there, which is super exciting. We celebrate it, we love it, and we love the work that Campus Pride does to make sure that students are able to know more about the work that happens on campuses across the country. But for us, the work isn't done. The work is never going to be done, because we're really wanting to make sure that we're, again, providing those equitable experiences, that we're celebrating the broader diversity of the community, and that we're making sure our LGBTQ+ students are successful. And so kind of the things that we're thinking for the next couple years, definitely growing the Kenyon Queer and Trans Studies Conference. So that is a pretty new. This is the second time it's happened this coming spring, but it's a new biennial, so happening once every 2 years conference, and it's open to undergraduate and graduate students, both at Kenyon but beyond, and that is essentially our sort of one of our signature programs. But it's an LGBTQ+ studies conference, and when we hosted it back in 2019. We had about 130 or 140, if memory serves, students, and about 40% of them were trans or non-binary, like 33% were students of color, and about 10% were students with disabilities. And we were really excited to see that level of diversity among conference attendees. But we were also very excited that we had students from more than 15 different colleges and universities coming to this conference. Some of them traveling as far away as the Deep South in New England, which to me is just really beautiful and so exciting. But really making sure that we're able to continue investing in that program and building it out. And so we're excited to be offering it for the second time, albeit virtually, this year. So that's something that definitely our students have expressed they're interested in. They want to see that grow. But we're also going to be continuing our partnerships and expanding our partnerships with statewide LGBTQ+ community organizations. That's something that we really intentionally do. We regularly communicate with organizations like Equality Ohio, Equitas Health, GLSEN of Central Ohio, and we also, want to extend those partnerships and make sure that we're also providing that support to the local community too. So one thing that our office does in Unity House, our students in Unity House do, is they actually work with GLSEN of Central Ohio, so our local GLSEN chapter, to actually provide and help out with facilitating the Knox County GSA. So it's the first gender and sexuality alliance for LGBTQ+ and allied high school students in the area. And so, stuff like that, those are the types of things that we really want to expand, we want to grow. And when I think in terms of academics, Kenyon does have a brand new, it's 2 years old. I was the first person to teach it, and it's being taught by another equally wonderful person this year. But we have a brand new queer studies course, and that is something that we were listening to our students, and they were saying, we want a standalone queer studies course. And obviously we have various other LGBTQ plus or gender and sexuality focused classes across campus and across disciplines, but our students were very specific when I entered my role, very specific that we need to have a dedicated queer studies course. And, you know, our office worked with the various academic units, so like the provost, for instance, and the Women's and Gender Studies program, to make sure that we were able to figure out how to make that happen. And it has. And now that is on the permanent course catalog. That's a course that is at Kenyon and is not going away. But really making sure that we're expanding and continuing those partnerships, but also making sure that more academic opportunities are provided for our students too. And then one last thing that's kind of really big on our radar is also really growing our connections with our LGBTQ plus alumni. We do have an LGBTQ plus alumni group, but really making sure that we're more actively connecting them with what's happening on campus, and, you know, inviting them back for various things that are happening during like LGBTQ plus History Month, Trans Day of Visibility, and some of the other larger programs that we sponsor too.
That was a really good answer. I really love the collaborations with GLSEN. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, we love our partners at GLSEN.
So I have a bit of a silly question, but what is the queerest or most LGBTQ plus aspect on your campus?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's hard to say though, really. And I don't want you to think like I'm like not like dodging the question or something, but it's really hard to say because, like I said, our LGBTQ plus representation does extend in so many areas of campus. I mean, when we think about like, you know, academic leaders in the office of the provost to identify within the community, we think of like leaders in student affairs. When we think of student council, like there's so much LGBTQ plus representation that's happening in leadership positions, and it's something that I really love to see. And, you know, that representation is also happening across identities, which I think is also super, super important and something that, you know, our campus community really celebrates. So, you know, when I'm thinking of like our student leaders, like there are so many identities. We have a lot of trans and non-binary student leaders. I myself identify as queer, trans, and non-binary. But I also identify within the ACE community too. And I know there have been plenty of ACE students that I've talked to that are like, it's so cool to see like another like person in the ACE community, like a leadership position. And I was like, I'm here just doing things, but y'all are the leaders of tomorrow. Like y'all be in this position. Like it, yeah, like that's the thing. Like our community is super diverse. So, you know, I guess when I have to say like, what's the queerest place? Like if I'm thinking like physical place, I would probably say Unity House. Like it's, you know, our LGBTQ plus program house. Like they've got tons of like queer and trans resources. Lots of events and student meetings happen there. And, you know, they also really, like I said, help out with so many wonderful things across campus. Every year for LGBTQ plus History Month and every year for Trans Day of Visibility, Unity House and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion work to, if you've seen like Kenyon, you've probably heard of like Middle Path, but it's basically this long path that stretches the length of campus, and we cover it in rainbow and trans pride flags. And for Trans Day of Visibility, we cover it in trans pride flags specifically. And those stay up for like an entire month. And then the really cool thing that I love about that is like that's an open area of campus that goes through downtown Gambier, and like people celebrate it, people like it. And the really, really wonderful and beautiful thing that I think about that is and I've had several first year students each year tell me this, but for some of them, they've never owned a pride flag. And at the end of the month, we always invite people like, hey, we need to get these pride flags up, but we also want you to help because we want to make sure that you have a pride flag. And so that's also a way that a lot of our students have shared that they get their first pride flag. And like that to me is just so beautiful. Like I still have my first pride flag. It hangs in my office along with several other pride flags. But I think that's really nice. And just, I don't know, it brings me a bit of joy, I guess.
Yeah, I think so too. So to end our spotlight, what are 3 words that you would use to describe your campus for a prospective LGBTQ plus student?
Yeah, I would say affirming. So like we're a campus, like I said, that does affirm our LGBTQ plus students in all aspects of campus life, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in athletics, whether it's in student life, whether it's in housing, whether it's in your health, your interactions with the community. Like you will find an affirming environment here. I would say responsive is another one too. Responsive being that the stuff that guides our work, like it happens because of students. The Kenyon Queer and Trans Studies Conference, the biggest LGBTQ plus student conference in the state of Ohio, literally happened because students were saying they wanted to have more academic spaces for conversations about LGBTQ plus studies. It happened because of them. Having prep at our campus health center happened because of students. Like these are things that these conversations with students guide our work. The queer studies class, the new queer studies class happened because of students. And so, really like I can't think of a more clear example of responsiveness really guiding our work. And then I guess like not to pass the buck and like try to come up with like an easy one. I would say real. Like we really try to be as transparent as possible. Like if you look at like, for instance, our Transit Kenyon page, we really work to make sure that those resources are frontward facing, that we're not gatekeeping them, that you can be a trans or non-binary student who wants information on changing your name or pronouns on student rosters, on class rosters. And you don't have to come see anyone in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. You don't have to see any of us to do that because we want that resource to be frontward facing. We want to not gatekeep that resource. And we want to be very transparent and real about it's a pretty straightforward process in terms of this, how to do it. Here's the information. We're definitely there to assist, but at the same time, we recognize that we don't want to gatekeep that. Like we do have tons of trans and non-binary students at the college that do regularly interact with our office, but that we don't want that to be an expectation. We don't want that to be a requirement for someone obviously getting the correct name on a class roster, for instance. And we really try to be transparent with all aspects of LGBTQ plus life on campus. We're thrilled that the Campus Pride Index profile is able to show so many things about our campus, but we also really work to make sure that our website is up to date with resources, that it has tons of useful information about community resources, how to access them, and again, just being very transparent and real about sort of what we can offer our students, and very real and pragmatic about our expectations of ourselves, of making sure that we're celebrating all aspects of the LGBTQ plus community, that we're not just talking about the L and the G part, that we're really talking about trans inclusion, that we're talking about issues of intersex inclusion, that we're talking about our ACE and ARO students, and that we're really making sure to celebrate that broader diversity in a real and authentic way.
Thank you so much. Please share for those watching on your website to learn more about LGBTQ plus life on your campus. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you today, and thank you so much. Campus Pride appreciates your hard work and continued efforts to create an inclusive space for LGBTQ plus students to learn, live, grow, and thrive at Kenyon College. Your work makes a positive difference in so many lives, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for having us. And if folks are interested in learning more, you can type Kenyon LGBTQ into Google and lots of stuff will come up. I can't remember the exact website for the LGBTQ plus landing page because URLs are weird, but kenyon.edu is the college's web address. But you can also check out the Campus Pride Index page and it'll take you there too.
Thank you so much. Thank you for watching the Campus Pride Spotlight series. If you wish to learn more about this campus or any other college or university, you can search for free at the Campus Pride Index online at campusprideindex.org. That's campusprideindex.org. For over 400 plus colleges and universities that have come out as LGBTQ plus friendly. Again, my name is Ayla, and thank you so much for watching.